Dirtle Magic. Hello and welcome back. You can follow our post on Twitter and Facebook at DirtleMTG to stay up to date on our latest videos and other posts, and you can join a more robust discussion about Casual Commander at our blog, thedicebag.blog. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this content to help the channel and the blog grow. Another way you can support the channel, though, is through our affiliate links in the description below. If you're looking for single sealed product or gaming accessories to protect all of that glory, please consider clicking the links in the description. Now, grab some spells, it's time to dirtle. Hello and welcome back to the Woods of Lorwyn. Today our host is Doran the Siege Tower. Getting lost in the trees among us are Lonis, Edgar Markov, and Rograkh and Ardenn. Lonis wins the die roll and starts the game off with an island into play. Markov drops a swamp. The partner player plays a plains, that's a lot of P's, and then they cast Rograkh. A Soul Ring follows it down, and they pass. I drop a Bountiful Promenade and cast a Wayfarer's Bauble. Breeding Pool enters for the Lonis player, untapped and dealing 2 damage to them. They then cast their commander. Markov drops a plains, and then they cast a Rakdos Signet. The partner player drops a plains, and then they cast their other commander, Ardenn. I draw on Doth of Triumph, and crack the bauble for a forest after dropping a swamp to the table. Lonis' turn sees a Mana Crypt. Then they cast Guardian Project and pass the turn. Markov puts a Spectator Seeding into play, and then cast Arcane Signet. It's followed by Cordial Vampire, and Eminence triggers from Markov to make them a 1/1 Vampire token. The partner player has another Plains into play. Forebearer's Blade hits the field, followed by a Starfield Mystic. They move to combat and Ardenn triggers. The Blade gets equipped to Rograkh, and they swing into the Markov player. The player decides not to block, and they take 3 commander damage. I gain a Nature's Claim for the turn, and cast Augur of Autumn. I then drop Bojuka Bog off the top of my deck to get it out of the way, exiling nothing with the trigger. Back to Lonis, and they lose 3 life to the Crypt Flip. Coiling Oracle hits the field, and Lonis triggers for a clue, and Guardian Project draws the player a card. Urza, Lord High Artificer, is revealed from the coiling trigger. Yay! A forest into play, and they sacrifice a clue to draw another card. Clifftop Retreat comes down for the Markov player. They cast a Chromatic Lantern, and then cast Denzia Masquerade. To the partner player, and other planes to the table. Helm of the Host is cast, and I worry about seeing a Goda at some point in the game. They move to combat, and Rograkh swings into the Lonis player. They take the damage, and it's 3 commander. My turn has me draw the Path to Exile off the top. I play a Plains and cast Mengar the Diplomat. I pass afterward, leaving mana up for either Nature's Claim or the Path. Lonis' turn has another Crypt trigger, and this time it's a win. A forest comes into play, and Rashmi Eternity's Crafter is cast. They create a clue and draw a card, and then cast Ongoing Investigation. Mengar triggers, and I draw the Golgari Charm off the top. Back to Markov, and they drop a Plains. They cast their commander, Edgar Markov, and move to combat. They swing Markov himself into me, and the Vampire token into the partner player. Markov triggers to give their vampires 1/1 counter apiece, and I respond with Path to Exile against the commander, and he returns to the command zone. The token goes unblocked, and it hits the partner player for 2. When it does so, it triggers the Masquerade, gaining another 1/1 counter. In the second main, they cast Talisman of Hierarchy, and Mengar draws me a Plains off the top. The partner player drops a Roadside Reliquary, which I really need a playmat of, please, somebody make it, and cast Consulate Crackdown. Lonis is activated in response, attempting to steal something from the partner player's top of deck. Nothing gets stolen, and Crackdown resolves, exiling all opponent's artifacts in play under it. They move to combat, and Helm gets equipped to the Starfield Mystic. It then gets to make a Mystic token. The player swings Rograkh into the Markov player, and with Menace, goes unblocked for 3 more commander damage. I draw a Leyline Prowler, and drop a Plains. I cast the Prowler, and then cast my commander, Doran the Siege Tower. I pass with an eye on Winds of Abandon for later. Over to Lonis, and Command Tower hits the field. Muldrifter is hardcast, and Rashmi triggers, revealing a Cyclonic Rift. Going to have to keep that in mind going forward. Muldrifter enters, and they draw 3 cards and gain a clue token. In combat, Rashmi is sent into the Markov player, and they don't block and take 2. When Rashmi connects, Ongoing Investigation triggers and creates a new clue token. 2 Markov, and they play Cabal Coffers. Viscera Seer hits the stack, and Eminence makes another 1/1 Vampire token. To combat, and a 3/3 Vampire token is sent against the Lonis player. They decide not to block and take the 3, with the token gaining another counter after connecting. The partner player drops a mountain on their turn. They cast a Humble Defector and move to combat. With their triggers, they move the helm over to the Defector, gaining a new token of it once that trigger resolves as well. They skip on attacks, and the turn rolls over. I draw Prava of the Steel Legion, and then I play a Murmuring Bosk tapped. I move to attacks, and begin to probe around with Doran attacking the Lonis player. They block with Coiling Oracle, and no damage gets through. When the Oracle dies, the Cordial Vampire triggers, and puts a 1/1 counter on each vampire the Markov player controls. Lonis' turn has Clone hit the stack, and my guess is it will be my Mangara. Rashmi triggers, and they reveal a Leyline of Anticipation. The clone comes in, and it does in fact copy Mangara. The Lonis player makes a clue token and draws a card as they do. Tropical Ion hits the field, and they activate Ongoing Investigation, exiling the Coiling Oracle from their graveyard, and make another clue token, and gain 2 life. Moving to combat, they swing the Muldrifter at me, and I am unable to block and take 2. Ongoing Investigation triggers, and they make yet another clue token. At the end of turn, the Markov player sacrifices their smaller token to Viscera Seer, scrying 1 and putting a 1/1 counter on their remaining vampires. Moving to the Innistrad Vampire Progenitor, they cast a Sign in Blood, drawing 2 cards and losing 2 life. Arid Mesa is dropped into play, and immediately cracked for Badlands. Forian, Valdarin Scion is cast, and both Mangara trigger along with Edgar Markov. They move to attacks, and swing only the 6/6 token into the Lonis player. The partner player responds by sacrificing the Roadside Reliquary to draw some cards, and Lonis is activated to steal a card off the top 5 of the Markov player's deck. They nab a Captivating Vampire, and draw a card and make a clue token. In response to these triggers, Generous Gift is cast by the partner player to destroy the Guardian project. The stack then resolves. 2 blocks, and the Captivating Vampire is used to fend off the 6/6 token, and it dies in combat. This triggers the Cordial Vampire for more counters. At the beginning of the second main, Forian triggers to scry X, but no opponent lost life this turn. The partner player activates their token Humble Defector to draw some cards, and the creature moves over to Markov. Trepanation Blade comes down, and they go to attacks. The Helm makes a new Humble Defector, and Ardenn moves the Trepanation Blade to Rograkh. They don't swing anywhere in combat, and in the second main, they activate their new Humble Defector to draw 2 more cards, and give this one to the Markov player as well. All That Glitters comes down, enchanting Rograkh and triggering the Mangaras. Sage's Reverie follows it down, also enchanting Rograkh, and that player draws 2 cards. The turn comes to me, and I draw a Web Spinner Cuff. I play a Plains, and cast an Angel of the Ruins, exiling Ongoing Investigation and Sage's Reverie. It's also a nice big flyer, so that works too. I pass with mana up for Nature's Claim, but mostly I'm bluffing that I have a Swords to Plowshares. Lonis' turn has a casting of Hornet Queen, and Rashmi triggers to reveal Lightning Greaves off the top. Lightning Greaves is cast, and I get a card from Mangara. Both spells resolve, and 4 1/1 deathtouch insects with flying are made, and a clue token is as well. The Greaves get equipped to Rashmi, and they pass, discarding 2 cards. Over to Markov, and they activate one of their Humble Defectors to draw some cards, and then sacrifice it to the Seer. This triggers the Cordial Vampire, and the Markov player gets a number of 1/1 counters again. In response to the trigger from the first Defector, Lonis activates their commander, sacking 2 clues and targeting the Markov player. That player responds by activating their other Defector, which they try to sacrifice as well, but for some reason doesn't work out. I gain the Defector to my side of the field. With new cards in hand, the Markov player casts Path on Lonis, and it goes to the command zone while that player grabs an island. The Lonis activation resolves, stealing a Knight of the Ebon Legion from the Markov player's top 2 cards. Dragon Skull Summit hits the field, and the Markov player casts the Ozolith. I draw Shadrix off the top thanks to Mangara. 2 attacks, and the rather large Vampire token and Forian are assigned to my face. I block the token with the Leyline Prowler and Forian with my Angel of Ruins. In response, they sack their smaller token to the Seer, buffing their vampires with the cordial one, and putting counters on the Ozolith. Power dies, further buffing the vampires, but I take no damage. They also sacrifice Florian to scry some more, put counters on the Ozolith, and the buff happens again. In the second main, Boros Signet comes down, followed by an Orzhov Signet. To the partner player after a very reactive turn, and they cast Etali, Primal Storm. Luxon Warhammer then hits the stack, and I draw Dusk to Dawn. They move to combat, and Ardenn moves the helm over to Etali, along with all of the other enchantments and equipment. The helm makes a token of Etali, who swings and triggers to exile the top cards. They nab a Gilded Lotus and Ende, the Dusk Rose, and cast both. Etali otherwise is coming at me, and I block with the Angel. The Angel kills the Etali token because of the toughness thanks to Doran, and Cordial and Ende trigger. At the end of turn, I use Nature's Claim to destroy the Helm of Hosts, and the partner player gains 4 life. I drop a Forest on my turn, and activate the Defector, giving it to the partner player. I then cast Winds of Abandon on Overload, risking it against the number of cards Lonis still has in hand, and exiling all opposing creatures as they go to grab some basic lands from their deck. The Ozolith also triggers 3 times, so it gets to store a bunch of counters. In response to those triggers, the partner player casts Aven Mind Sensor. After the stack resolves, I cast Web Spinner Cuff, not wanting to discard too much, and move to combat. I swing everything able into the Lonis player because I know they have a Cycrypt and Urza in hand, and drop them to 12. I move to the end of turn and discard Farseek, Shadrix, and Prava. The turn rolls to Lonis, and they cast Ugin the Spirit Dragon. They activate his +2 and deal 3 damage to the Mind Sensor, which I'm somewhat surprised by, but thankful for. They then cast Seagate Oracle, and Mangara grabs me Find and Finality off the top, revealing Sereth. The Lonis player passes with mana up for that Cycrypt. Over to Markov, and they activate the coffers for 7 mana. I worry they might cast Ruinous Ultimatum with it, but they just recast the commander. Lightning Greaves then hits the stack, and they equip it to Markov, and I draw Sereth. Moving to attacks, the Ozolith triggers, and each of us think that they forgot about the Shroud, but they declare that they actually don't want to give counters to anything at the moment. They target the Angel anyway because they have to pick a target, but choose not to give it any counters. They pass the turn afterward. The partner player recasts their commander Rograkh, and follows that up with a recasting of Ardenn. With the second cast, Mangara triggers, and I draw Runic Armasaur. Quite a spike comes down, and I get slightly worried about it. Keleth's Unmained Familiar hits the field as well, along with a Bonder's Enclave. They move to combat, and Ardenn triggers, moving all of the equipment over to Rograkh. They don't attack, and move to the second main, where they activate Enclave for some card draw. To my turn, and I drop a Sunpearl Grove. Knowing that there's likely a Cycrypt in the future, I go straight to attacks and swing everything at Lonis, forcing their hand. They cast the Cycrypt, and the boards get bounced away. In the second main, I cast Doran, and then Sereth. While Sereth is on the stack, the Lonis player casts Pondrify on Doran himself, and he hits the graveyard, where he stays for now. I finish the turn by casting Runic Armasaur, and move to discard. I've been in Death of Triumph, Phyrexian Arena, Augur of Autumn, Web Spinner Cuff, and Dusk to Dawn, knowing I can use Dawn later with Aftermath. Back to Lonis, and Mana Crypt triggers. They lose the flip this time, and go down to 9. Gilded Lotus then hits the battlefield. Urza, Lord High Artificer, then comes down, and creates a Construct token. Greaves is equipped to them, and then Clever Impersonator comes down and is a copy of Sereth. Ugin is activated to deal 3 damage to my face, and I begin formulating a plan to eliminate the Lonis player from the game involving Poison-tipped Archer. The turn moves over to Markov, and Cobalt Coffers is activated for 6 mana. With that mana, Orzhov Signet and Boros Signet are recast. Edgar Markov then comes back to the stack, and is spell swindled away by the Lonis player. Crossway Troublemakers then comes down for the Markov player, and they make a Vampire token. Their own Lightning Greaves then hits the field, followed by Stesnia Masquerade. The Greaves gets equipped to the Vampire token, and the Ozolith returns to the battlefield. Moving to combat, they swing the Hasty token into the Lonis player, who takes 1, and the Markov player gains 1, thanks to the lifelink given by the Troublemakers. The token also gains a counter from attending a Stesnia Masquerade. The partner player's turn sees Rograkh return to the field. That player casts Fell the Mighty, and I feel like my plans have been dashed. However, Lonis counters the wipe with a Mystic Snake, which solves my issues of needing creatures to die and possible counter magic. Consulate Crackdown also hits the sack, and in response, Urza is activated for some value, and Armasaur gets to trigger, drawing me the Birth of Miladies. Urza gets a Kodama's Reach, which they have remain in exile. Consulate Crackdown resolves, which I take as a good sign about a lack of counters. Sol Ring is then cast, and is followed by Ardenn, and then Lux and then Warhammer. They move to combat, attaching the Warhammer to Rograkh, and pass afterward. I draw planes, and drop the planes. I cast Poison Tip Archer, and follow that up with a very tense and suspenseful finality of Find and Finality. Lonis responds with activating Urza again, and I draw with the Armasaur, a sapling of Kolfener. They Urza into a Genesis Wave, and luckily not counter magic, so Finality gets to resolve. I add the counters to the Armasaur, and wipe the board of most other creatures. Poison Tip Archer triggers 9 times, taking the Lonis player out of the game, more or less. I pass afterward. 2 Markov and a Fetid Heath hits the field. They recast Edgar, and move to combat. Markov and the Troublemakers both swing into the partner player. They cast Condemn in response, and exile the Troublemakers. They take 5 commander damage otherwise, going down to 28. They tap down the rest of their mana and pass. Over to the partner player, and Rograkh comes back down. Ardenn follows, and so does Forebearer's Blade. Inspiring Vantage makes a land drop, and Trepidation Blade is cast. They move to combat, and Rograkh gains all of the equipment. My turn brings me Finn, the Fangbearer, and now I have poison as a win option. Now I just need a deathtouch Lord effect. I cast the Birth of Miladies, and grab a basic plains from my deck. I play the land, and cast Angel of Ruin. It enters, and I exile the Luxon Warhammer, and Stesnia Masquerade. Priest of Fell Rites then comes down, and I pass the turn. Strip Mine comes down for Markov, and they pass. To the partner player, they cast Vandal Blast, not overloaded on my poor Angel, and it hits the bin. Killith makes a return to the battlefield, and so does the dreaded Quietus Spike. 2 attacks, and Ardenn does the thing, equipping Rograkh with the spike. Strip Mine is activated to destroy the Bonder's Enclave, and in response, it's activated to draw the partner player a card. Stack resolved, the Rograkh player attacks into me, and Trepidation Blade triggers. I mill 3 cards, and assign double blockers, forgetting the creature has trample. Both of my creatures die, and I end up taking 5 commander damage, and then lose half my life total, going from 38 to 16. Oof. In the second main, Pillage is cast against the Cabal Coffers, and a little bit of back and forth on land destruction between my opponents. My turn rolls back around, and I draw an Angel of Destiny, which is still something I'm testing out in here. My Saga also triggers, giving me a 0/4 wall token with Defender. I cast Dawn with Aftermath from my graveyard, and return all creatures power 2 or less from my graveyard to my hand. Decisions are made, and I cast Statue on the Spike, making sure I don't have to deal with it later. Leyline Prowler follows it down, and I pass, discarding Priest of Fell Rites, Armasaur, Golgari Charm, Prava, Angel of Destiny, Web Spinner Cuff, and Augur of Autumn. Markov's turn sees them just tap everything down, and pass. Back to the partner player, and they move straight to combat. The mighty Kobold is swung at me again, and I mill 1 because of the Trepidation Blade, and their creature gains a 1/1 counter. I double block, losing the Prowler in combat, but keeping the wall. My turn brings me a Forest, and my Saga triggers to give me 2 life. I drop the Forest and cast Shadrick's Silverquill. I follow that up with Sapling of Kolfener for some indestructible defense. Lastly, I cast Doran so my aggression can be via toughness, and move to combat. Shadrick's triggers, and I give an Inkling to the Markov player while I gain a 1/1 counter on all of my creatures I control. I pass, hoping my setup won't be blown up. Markov casts Rakish Air on their turn, gaining yet another vampire token. In combat, Edgar is sent into the partner player. The player takes the damage, going down to 21, and Edgar becomes stronger with new counters. Skullclamp is cast for the partner player. It's equipped to Killith, and they draw 2 cards when the creature dies. Ghost Quarter hits the field, and Skullclamp is re-equipped to Ardenn. The player passes. I draw Utter End on my turn. I cast Bow of Nyla, and move to combat. After I declare attackers though, in response to my sapling trigger, I use the Bow of Nyla to knock the Inkling out of the sky on the partner player's side. The sapling whiffs, and the combat phase proceeds. The player doesn't block, and my attackers deal exactly lethal to the opponent thanks to Doran's ability. In the second main, I cast Mangara, and pass, holding up mana for Utter End. 2 Markov, and Village Rites is cast with them having to sacrifice a creature. They choose the Vampire token to do so. They cycle a Savai Triumph, and then cast Deadly Dispute, sacking the Inkling, digging for an answer, and drawing more cards. They move to combat, and the Ozolith triggers. They add the counter to Edgar, and swing with the Progenitor. I cast Ende, targeting the Vampire, and he returns to the command zone. The Ozolith gains their counters, and the turn rolls to the second main phase. Indulgent Aristocrat comes down, and Markov gains another token. They sacrifice the treasure, and then cast Pact of the Serpent, drawing 3 cards. Plumb the Forbidden is cast, and copied with a creature sacrificed once for it. They draw 2 cards, and lose 2 life. Finally finding an answer, they cast Farewell, exiling the entire board of enchantments and creatures, and the Ozolith gains a number of counters. Doran puts down roots in the command zone for now, and, well, crud. With their remaining mana, they cast Blood Artist and gain another Vampire token. Greaves gets equipped to the Artist, and they pass. My turn sees an isolated chapel, and that is not very helpful at the moment. I play Fabled Passage, and grab a swamp from my deck to play. I cast Poison Tip Archer, and recast Doran. I pass, still wanting to save Finn for later. Markov's turn sees a Snow Mountain come into play. Olivia's Attendance is cast, and Greaves gets equipped to them. They recast their commander, who unfortunately has haste. Lastly, they cast Unbreakable Formation, which means I can't even trade with the vampires even with Death Touch, and they get a 1/1 buff. They go to combat, and the Ozolith triggers, giving its counters to Markov himself. They swing everything able, and I block Markov with Doran, and the Vampire token with the Archer. Doran and the Archer both die in combat, triggering the Archer and the Artist. Unfortunately, the opponent nets 1 life through all these interactions, and I drop to 4. This is likely game without a board wipe. To me, and I draw an Overgrown Tomb. I play Isolated Chapel, and recast Doran. I follow that up with Finn, and prepare for defeat. I think Finn would approve of a last stand. 2 Markov, and they cast Phyrexian Altar. Soren, Vengeful Bloodlord, makes his way to the field, is activated to poke me in the eye for 1 damage. They move to attacks, and swing everything they have. I block the Artist with Doran, and Finn intercepts a Vampire token. It's not enough though, and I'm taken down. Good game to my opponents. Doran as a commander was once a very unique one. It changes the fundamental rules of the game, and makes combat a little bit more tedious but also a little bit more interesting. The upside, of course, is that you can use this to your advantage, usually better than your opponents. While the newer Arcades and Zilortha, Strength Incarnate, who's also known as Godzilla the King of Monsters, steps on his roots a little bit, I think Doran still has a place at the table. He just needs the love of a few upgrades and updates. Thank you for tuning in to another Casual Commander game here on Dirtle Magic. Until next time, wield your heart, and the world will tremble.